Hello and welcome to Cheetah Coding. I wanted to do a video about React Hook Form, and this is a library that helps you create forms in your React apps. So about a year ago, I talked about another library called Formik, and that is a more popular form building library for React. But I actually prefer this library over Formik because it takes advantage of the hooks, which are a more modern approach to React programming. I'm going to focus on creating the simple login form as you see here. And I'm going to focus on 4 different aspects of the process, and that is the controllers for your form. I'm going to show you how to use the hook for your form. I'm going to show you how to watch different values that the user inputs. And I'm going to show you how to use yup for validating your forms. Okay, so let's get started. As you can see here, we have a very simple login form, and it's just a very basic scroll view with an image, some text, 2 text inputs, a touchable opacity for the button, and a lot of different styles that I created. So all these styles here are used up here in the components. And I also created an error style that we will use here in a few minutes. It's just a style for the error text, which will be red. Okay. So if you go to the package.json, I've already installed the React Hook Form package here. Going to the documentation. Okay, so I've already done this here. And it kind of walks you through how to use it for both React.js and React Native. Okay, so back to the code. The first thing I want to do is import our React Hook Form. So up here, let's do import from React. Okay, and I'm going to import a few different things here. I'm going to import the useForm. So this is our actual hook. And then I'm going to import a controller component. So it's called controller. And for the controller component, if we go back to the docs real quick, normally you would actually reference a form input using the ref prop here. And this works best on the web for React.js. But if you want to use React Native, you have a couple different options. So let's search for React Native. And there's a section here for that. And they recommend using the controller component here. So instead of registering your component with the register prop, you would use the controller component and wrap your input in that controller component. And you also pass in a control field here, which comes from the useForm hook. So first, let's use our hook. So let's go back to the app. And at the top, let's do it up here. So I'm going to say constant. And then I'm going to get the control from here. Okay. Inside of this useForm, you also have a few other options. So you have mode, revalidate mode, default values, etc. So we're going to use a couple of these things here. But first, let's go back to our inputs, and we're going to add control, and we add a submit function. So it's called handleSubmit from the useForm hook. And we also add errors. So this will be an object that has our errors. And then I want to add a reset. So if you want to reset the values of your form, then you would use the reset field here. Okay, and it's actually a function. Okay, and inside of our useForm, we can also create a few different things here. So I want to create the default values for our form. So let's go down here. And I want to say default values. And this is the object. So we pass in whatever we want. I want to have our name and email. So I'm going to name those name and email. So first will be name. And then default empty string. And same for the email. So email empty string. And this should be name. Okay. And now we have our control value here. So let's go down here to our text inputs and wrap those in a controller component. So let's do controller. And then for the controller component, you have a few different options. You have control. So we just pass in our control from the hook. Control. And then we have a render. So render is what you would actually like the control to render itself. So for the render, we want to actually render our text input. So render takes in a few different values. So first I'm going to write these out for you and then explain what they are. So parentheses, and then I want to say on change text and get our value. Okay, and this is a function. So let's do arrow function, and then I want to parentheses here. And then close our brackets. Oh yeah, we need to close the controller. we need to add a few different things to our controller here. So we also need to add the name. So this name will reference what the name of the input is. So let's say name and then equals name. So that is a reference to this up here. So the default value name. So this has to be the same name as this here. And you can also add a default value here too. I don't think you need to if you add it up top, but you can say default value equals empty string. Let's try it without it. I don't think you need to add that. Okay, so now we have our onChange text and value. So if you want to see what all is available to you here, let's click inside of here. And then I think you want to hover over control render props. And you can see we have onChange, onBlur, value, name, and ref. So we only care about the onChange and value for now. So let's go back. And I want to wrap the controller around the email text. So let's wrap this around here, copy this, and change this to email. So we use the same control value for each controller input here. And close our brackets. Okay, no errors, that's good. Let's reload. And if you want to see how this works so far, you can go up here and we can log something. So let's log the console.log. We can log the actual control. Let's see what this is. So let's save. And we can ignore that warning for now. I might come back to this later. So we get a lot of different values inside of this control object. But let's actually get rid of this for now. So let's go down to our button. So first I want to use our handleSubmit from up here. Whenever you want to actually handle the submit, you have to wrap whatever function you want inside of that handleSubmit higher order function. So let's say handleSubmit. And then I want to create a function called submit. So for now, let's just say submit. And then let's create the function up here. I want to create a function and say submit. And then once you do this, it passes in some data. So this would be the same as saying like this here. So this is a shortcut. So instead of saying data, we'll just say submit. And then we'll just pass in our data up here. So data. And now here I want to actually log our console.log and then log our data. This is a lot better than logging that entire control object. Okay, let's save. Let's reload. So now let's press submit and see what happens. We get an empty string email name. So let's actually put in some values here. Let's put in some random strings. And press submit. And you see that we still have empty strings. So that is because we're not actually listening for the changes in our form. So let's go down here to our onChange text. You see here? So now we need to add something here. So the onChange text function comes from our controller component here. So that's why this prop here is very important. So now we can say on, or actually first let's get our value. So we can say value arrow function onChange text, and then we can pass in our value. onChange. Let's go back here real quick. See what this is. onChange. Okay, not onChange text. onChange. Very important. Okay, let's do the same down here. Let's copy this here. Save. So now let's reload. Let's put in some strings here. And onChange. I forgot to change this back to. Okay. Reload. Now let's put in some values. And now let's press submit. Now you can see our values are put into that data field. Okay, so when you have a successful submit, this function will get called. Now, let's say that you want to actually monitor what the value is as the user is typing. So let's go up here, and now I want to add another field to the useForm, and I want to call this one watch. So watch is a part of the useForm hook here. Okay. Watch is actually pretty easy to use. You would just go up here, and I can create a variable. I could say constant name watch, I guess, equals, and then I would set it to watch. So watch is a function, and then I would pass in the actual value that I want to listen for. So let's say name. And now I can say console.log name watch. Save. And now if we change the value of name, you can see it's being logged here. Okay, sorry about that. I had to restart. Okay, so let's test that again. Let's type some stuff in name. Now we see you have the actual value being logged every time. So we're actually watching the value of name. So be careful not to abuse this. It could slow down your app if you have like 100 different watches in your component, so that's not good. That's just a way to monitor like a certain field in your form. And there's also another way to do this too. So if you want to actually put this inside of a sub component, like a custom component, then you can actually use a hook too. So if you go up to your React hook form, you can actually import a use watch. Yeah. So instead of doing it this way, you could say constant name watch equals, and then you call the hook. So you can say use watch. Then you can pass in your control first. So I think you pass in control here, then passing in the name value. So name, string, name. So I want to watch the name. And then I want to set the default value here too, if you want to. Default values, and you could say, you could just put default name. Okay, so let's save, reload. And then now you should get the same result here. Okay. Okay, so that's just showing you how to actually watch different inputs in your app. The use watch hook is convenient because it only watches the value from a component level. So if you have it in a smaller component, like inside of a custom text component, then it won't rebuild the entire form. It'll just rebuild that custom component. Okay. So let's get rid of this for now. Yeah, I'll keep that commented out. That's not really useful for this video. And we need to, oh yeah, get rid of this too. So let's get rid of this for now too. And now I want to show you how to actually reset the value. So let's say you put in some stuff here, and then when you press submit, you want to reset it. So that's pretty easy. You could just go down here, and when you submit, you just call the reset function. Okay, so let's put in some values here, press submit. Ah, that's right. So I forgot to actually use the value here. So we need to tell the text input what value it should have. So let's go down here, and we need to put in our value for the text input. So that's why the value wasn't actually being updated correctly. So let's do value, and then copy this down here. Okay, let's reload. Now let's put in some strings here, press submit. And now you can see our form was reset to the initial values of empty strings. So the last big topic I want to cover for this is validation. So let's go to the docs, and I'm going to the React form repo here. You can see it. And there's also a section called resolvers. Resolvers allow you to tell the form how to validate the data. Okay. You want to install resolvers. I've already done that in the app. So back here, you can see I have installed, where is it? Resolvers here. And as you can see here, there's a few different resolvers that you can use for React. There's Yup, Zod, Superstruct, Joy. I always prefer Yup. So Yup is the one that I started out with when I first started React. And this is the one that I still like the most. So yup is pretty easy to use. You just install yup and you tell it what the actual fields are, and then you tell it what the validation schema should be. Yup.string.required. So this is a required string, and age is a number that is also required. And there's a lot more that you can do with it too. I'll cover a little bit of it in this video. So let's go back to the app, and I've already installed yup too here. So yup. So just do npm install yup. So first let's go up here and install or import yup. So up here, let's do import, and we'll just do a star for yup. So we can just name it yup from yup. And it should be as, so as yup. And now above the actual component, I want to actually define our schema. So let's do constant schema equals yup.object dot schema or dot shape. Yeah. And this is the normal way that you would actually define all your schemas with yup. And then now I want to define our two fields. So we have name and email. So first we'll put name and do yup.string. So it's a string. And instead of just having it say required, like so, I want to actually limit the number of characters. So I want to say a minimum length and a maximum length. Luckily in Yelp, there's an easy way to do that. You could say .min. So .min, you pass in the actual value for the minimum value, and then you pass in a message that gets displayed whenever that condition is not met. So first I want to say minimum of maybe 3 characters. And then when that value is not met, I want to say name must be between 3 and let's say 20 characters. So that will be my max. So 20 characters. Okay, and then down here, I want to say dot max and set that to 20. And then I want it to be the same text. So let's just copy and paste this here. Paste. And that's our name validation schema. And then let's do our email. So email yup.string. And then luckily in yup, there's already an email schema. So we can say .email. And then when this condition is not met, I want to say invalid email. So when it parses our value and says that we don't have a valid email, then I want to show this string here. Okay, and then I also want to say dot required. Let's put it down here, dot required. And then when the email is empty, I want to show a different message. So I want to say email is required. So this field here will have 2 different error messages based on the actual parsing of the data. Okay, let's save. And now to actually use our schema, our yup schema, instead of our React hook form, there's a way to hook those two together. So instead of our useForm hook, you could say resolver, and then you define the resolver as yup resolver. So I need to actually import this first. Let's go up here and say import from at hook resolvers. And I think it's called yup resolver. Yup. Oh yeah, this needs to be resolvers / yup. And then we can say yup resolver. Going back to the docs, it's the same as here. So now down here in our resolver field, we can say yup resolver. And this is a function. So we want to pass in the actual schema. So schema. Okay, so this is how we hook our schema up to our React hook form. So now let's actually go down here, log the errors field to see what that is. Oops, it should be console.log. So you can see here, we have a blank field for our errors. Let's reload this. So now let's actually press submit and see what happens. So you can see here, we have a error block here. So we have email, message, email is required. And that's what we have up here. Email is required. And name, message, name must be between 3 and 20 characters. Type min. So min, same string here. Okay, and if you notice something else too, we did not have our submit function called. So we don't see this console.log.data field here. So that's something that's very important too. So if your validation fails for React hook form, then your handleSubmit function will never get called. And that's what we want, because you don't want to actually submit some data to your API or your backend if you have an invalid form. So let's actually get rid of this too to make it more clean. So now we can use this error block here to actually write some text for the user. So let's go down below our controllers. So below our first controller, I want to write some text here. So text. And then for the style of our text, I want this to be red. So I already created the style here for the error text right here. So let's put in our style. Let's say style equals styles.error. And then for the error text, what we show will be based on if we have any errors or not. So if we have no errors, we will always get back an empty object here, not null. So that's important. And then if we have errors, we'll get back the field with the message here and the type. It'll be errors.email or errors.name and then .message. So I want to show this based on that errors object here. Okay. So in here, I want to say errors.name. So I could create like a ternary operation, but I'm going to use some null operators for JavaScript. So if you don't know how to use this yet, I encourage you to look up null operators in React or JavaScript. So errors.name question mark dot message. Okay, let's save. And you can see we have our message here too. So this is saying if our errors object contains a name field, so if it's not an empty string, or if we only have the email field only, but not the name field, then get the name field, then get the message from the name object and display it. Okay, so this text component will always be showing, but it'll either be an empty string or it'll be this message here. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So let's go down here, let's copy this and do the same for the email. So down here, I want to say errors.email.message. Okay, so let's reload. And now you can see we have a lot of space here because I added these text inputs. I'm going to remove some space down here. Let's remove the input margins here. See how this looks. Save. Okay, now let's press submit and see what happens. Nothing yet. Let's reload this. Submit. Okay. So if you don't see those errors, you might have to reload the app to make sure that your values are reset. So you can see our name message and our email message here. So you can keep pressing submit, but the submit function is never called here. This is never called. So let's see what happens when we start typing here. Let's start typing. And now you can see our error went away here because as you type, the form re-renders and that condition is no longer true. So we get no error for our name field. And you can see here for our error object, you no longer see the name and the object here. You only see the email. Okay, so let's go down here. Let's start typing here. And I can see it changed to invalid email because we have text. So the required condition is met. Let's say test@gmail.com. And I can see that went away. And our error block is now an empty string. So this is one way to actually validate your form. You can validate as you type, or you can validate as you press the onSubmit button only. So let's go up here. I want to go down here and there's a option called revalidate mode. So here you have the option on change, on submit. Right now it's on change. So let's change it to on submit. So let's save and reload. Now let's start typing. And you can see that the error never shows up now. Okay. Here too, same. But let's press submit. And now you can see the error here. So the form only validates now once you press the submit button. So depending on your requirements, you might either revalidate the form on submit or on change. On blur is an option too, but people don't really use that a lot. I prefer on submit or on change. Okay, I'm going to actually go back to the default behavior now. Let's get rid of this. For the submit function here, just so you know, like once you submit it here, we can reset the form, and then after this, you can do whatever you want to. You can store data in state management. You can call some login API that you have. You can navigate to the next screen, etc. Reload this, and I want to put in a valid form. So let's go up here. Let's say Julian. Let's say test@gmail.com. Press submit. And now you can see our submit here. So this is coming from the submit here. Let's actually console log to make sure. So let's say console.log submitted. Reload. Put in some random string here. gmail.com. Submit. And you can see it submitted. So this object is what you would pass to your API or your change notifier or the next screen, etc. Okay, there's one last thing I want to show you how to do. You might see this in a few other apps. I don't want the user to be able to press submit if the form is not valid. So this is just another UI improvement to make your app seem a little bit more thought out and professional. You see now we can press submit over and over again, right? But I want to prevent the user from doing that. So let's go down here, and in the touchable opacity, I want to use the field called, or the prop called disabled. So this disables the opacity button. So you can say true or false, but I want to put a ternary operation. So I want to say if the field is valid, then the button should be enabled. If it's not valid, disable the button. So remember, the form is not valid if our errors object is not an empty object. So checking whether an object is empty by itself is a bit of a pain in JavaScript, but I want to use a library called Lodash. So I've added Lodash already in the package here, in the package.json here. And I'm just going to use it. I'm not really going to go to Lodash. If you want to look up Lodash, it is a very handy library that has a lot of utility functions to make your life a lot easier with working with JavaScript. So up here, I'm going to import Lodash. So I'm going to say import something from Lodash, and I will import the isEmpty function here. So this will tell me if some object is empty. So let's go down here to our opacity, and I want to say equals isEmpty errors. So if our errors object errors is empty, I want this to be false. Else I want it to be true. Okay, hope that makes sense. If we have errors, then disable the opacity button. So let's save, reload. So when it first loads, that value is false. So we don't have any errors when it first loads. So let's press submit. Now you see we have errors. So let's press submit again. Now you can see I cannot press submit again. I'm pressing submit, nothing happens. That's because now we have a non-empty error object. Okay, and let's put in some values here. So let's go like this, press submit. It's still disabled. Let's put in some email, test@gmail.com, press submit, and now you can see it was enabled until I press it again. Now we have our errors. Now I cannot press it again. And to make it clear that it's disabled to the user, I want to change the color of the button too. So let's go over here. And we have a color set down here for the button right here. But now I want to add that as a condition up here. But now I want to add it inside of our style prop directly. So let's get rid of this here. This would actually be a lot easier with styled components, but that's not really important right now. So let's go get rid of that. And now up here, I want to wrap this in brackets again. So I want to use the spreader operator. So this says, okay, for this style here, use all the values from the button and then comma, but add this other style to it too. Okay, so now I want to set the background color directly. So let's do this like so. So we can press save, reload, and it looks the same now. Okay, let's put this on a different line. And now instead of this, I want to have a conditional. So let's create a ternary operation. I want to say is empty, like we did above, errors. If that's true, I want to have that be red. If it's not true, I want that to be a grayish color. I think a gray color I like a lot before is 999. So 6 nines is good. So I think that should be a good color. So let's press save. Let's reload. So now we have no errors because it's the first time it loads. So let's press submit. And now we have our disabled button that's also gray. And then when we put some stuff in here, so let's put some valid information here. Let's do this. And test@gmail.com. And I can see our button is enabled with the correct color. And we can press submit. And then we can press submit again and disabled. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to talk about with React Hook Form. It's a pretty easy library to use. I like it a lot better than Formik, and it kind of follows the more modern conventions of React development. So yeah, stay tuned for the next video, and happy coding. Bye.